We go. So welcome back to another episode of Rugspirations, the place where we interview rug hookers from all over and all styles, backgrounds, experiences. And today we have a special guest, one of my new favorite teachers, Ania Knap, who is from the Boston area, and I'm from the Ottawa, Ontario area. We're just sort of comparing where we're from, and we're not too far. So welcome and thank you for joining me today, Ania.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me.
So for those that follow me, I'm just going to point out, Ania is the teacher that taught me the torn strip poppy class, because I've been sharing that piece and people have been admiring it, but I always point back. So this is Ania Knap, who taught that workshop in Vermont that I got to go to last year. And also the creator behind the Anias Rug, which again, just for those people that follow me, have been seeing that progress. And those in the Creativity Club, many of them have been doing their own versions of it. So you've inspired a lot of people lately, Ania, with your very different designs. The poppy design is totally different from your Anias Rug design. But that's what I love about rug hookers, is we can do so many different things.
It's great fun.
It is great fun. So we'll get right into the questions. I always ask the same sort of 6 questions, but then we never know where they'll take us. So, and I have no idea this part of your history. So who or what got you started in rug hooking?
Oh, it's very interesting. In 2000, well, you'll never believe it. In 2007, I was actually, we had a biotech company in the greater Boston area, and I was the president and chief scientific officer. We had just got it funding for the company. We had just opened our labs, and I was obsessively working in science and technology and making sure that was all going. And I decided that I need a break from doing all this science and all this raising of funding. And there was an advertisement in the newspaper of our local town. They were having at the high school an open house of adult evening classes. And I said, oh, this sounds kind of interesting. It'll be great to see what's going on there. So I took an evening off and I went to the cafeteria and I was looking at the woodworking and all the quilting and things. And I came across 2 tables across from one another. At one table was Russian punch, which I thought was really gorgeous. And across from her was a woman with rug hooking, which I had never heard of. It was something so new. And I kept looking at the beautiful stuff that the woman that had with the rug hooking done and the other woman with the punch. And I stood there and I said, this is so great. This would be really a great break. But I really like this. This would be a great break. And finally, the woman who was teaching the rug hooking class said to me, well, you could do both. And I thought, oh, what a great idea. So I signed up for both classes. I took the rug punch. I've never done rug punch since then.
Oh. I was going to ask
and I've been hooking ever since.
Now, class. I don't know, Russian rug punch, is that similar to like a embroidery fine, like a, okay.
It's with the fine embroidery punch needle, and you do it on very small scale.
Yes, yeah, because it's so tiny.
Right.
Okay. And did you enjoy that one as well? It just, you were enthralled with the rug hooking, or how did
I enjoyed the rug punch. It was a lot of fun, and it was really very interesting to do. And I did a couple of pieces in the class. I think they were 6-week classes. But with the rug hooking, it was interesting. The first day we got to choose which pattern of 2 we wanted to work on. And 2 weeks later, I was done with my pattern. And I said to the teacher, can I do the other one? And she said, yes. It was such a great stress reliever for me. That's why I just, and it just has carried me through for quite a while now.
Yeah. Wow. And I'm curious, what were the first patterns like? Like, were they fine shading and?
Oh, no.
Oh, no. Okay.
They were 2 floral patterns. One was both primitive, and it just two fedulas. And they were the size of a pillow or a chair mat if you wanted.
Yeah.
And it was just, and she provided the noodles from her stash, and it was all like in this 6 cut. And it's interesting because that group of women who were in that class to this day still hook rugs, and they've moved all over the country. So it's really very interesting to see that she's held a wonderful group of people going for a long time.
Wow. Yeah, that is pretty special because that's like 20 years or so. And to have everybody in the class sort of really incorporate it into their life, you know.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was a great group of people, and she was a very nice, soft-spoken woman, Marcia Kent. She was great.
Wow. Oh, that's special. Oh, I love those kind of stories. And I can
There was
picture
no
standing in
turning
a
back.
classroom or in a cafeteria, sort of like, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Do you have a favorite part of the process? Like, is it planning or working, like just pulling the loops? Or I know you dye wool, so is it, part of the dyeing? Or finishing or admiring? Some people love that, that feeling of just looking at the finished piece. If you had to pick.
If I had to pick, it would be a lot like actually how I approached my previous life in science. It would be starting the journey of whatever it is, either planning it, the pattern, or color planning what I'm doing, or deciding what the topic will be, and then just getting on that mental road and going with it and seeing where it takes me. Because most of the time, it's a completely different place than when I first thought about where I was going to go. And so I think I just enjoy the whole process of going to the end, and probably least like finishing, because that means the end.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, I wonder if that is why so many people really struggle with the finishing. Like it's not for, some people say to me anyway, oh, it's because I'm not good at it or I'm not. But I wonder if part of it is just that mental, like you don't want it to end. So you avoid those final stages of, yeah.
I have to be in the right frame of mind to actually be working on finishing something, because it's almost like saying, and this might sound a little corny, it's almost like saying goodbye to a friend and moving on to the next stage and not knowing when you're going to see them again.
It is a little corny, but I can totally relate because I felt that way with certain rugs more so than others. Like certain rugs that surprised me, like your Isa rug, which for people that don't know it, it's all straight line hooking. And so I was a little like, I really like the look of it, but am I going to be bored? Like, am I going to, and it was the opposite. Like it was a very therapeutic hooking experience that I did not want to end. I was really sad, and I can see it out of the corner of my eye. It's hanging over there. And I'm just like, yeah, like it was. And I think that was part of it. It was like, oh, I'm going to say goodbye. And when am I going to do straight lines again? Like, when am I going to get this feeling again?
I'm glad that someone else thinks the same way.
I hadn't thought of it in those terms before, but it's definitely that same kind of feeling.
Well, I wonder if people just develop a relationship with the pieces that they're working on. There's some kind of emotional attachment to it, or technical thing that you actually like so much that you develop this relationship with it, and it makes it fun.
Yeah.
I sound like a scientist. Because I was passionate about my science before, and now I'm passionate about this.
Yeah. Do you see a lot of similarities though between the sort of part of your brain that did the science with part of your brain that does the hooking? Is that very similar for you?
That's a great question, Robin. It is exactly the same thing for me. Science is one thing, the chemistry is one thing that I just fell in love with long ago. And when I was no longer able to do it because of an injury, and I started the rug hooking full time, it's the exact same thing. I think of science and art as being the same. One is one side, one is the other. And there's a lot of science that goes into the rug hooking that I do and the design of things that I do and the dyeing.
Mhm.
There's a lot of science that goes into it.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder if it kind of, and I haven't thought this through, so maybe it won't make a lot of sense. But for me, I do not have a science background at all. But I have like my previous life was in social work and counseling. And so I see that in my rug hooking and in my own experience, but also when I'm teaching, like I feel like the same skills. So I wonder if it's kind of that whatever we have, whatever we're bringing to the table before rug hooking, we will continue to embed that or, like feel those processes in the rug hooking, even though they seem irrelevant. Like, even if you think science, laboratory work, and rug hooking are very different, like visually, or, in my mind, they're different. But because that's where you come from, that's just what you're bringing to the table. So it's going to be similar. And I see the psychology that people, the thought process people go through when they come to a new pattern and the struggles from that kind of, and the language I often hear myself using is the same language I would use in a counseling relationship in terms
Uh,
of supporting the person to help them figure out what's best for their own piece. Not to tell them or, not to say, oh, I have the answers. It's much more of like, you can do it.
right, right.
um,
Yeah, it really does. I mean, I'm looking behind you at your yarn that you have, and I'm looking at the blues, and I'm thinking to myself, that blue or blue that a 4-year-old sees, you and I can no longer see it as vividly because of the way of the biology of the eye. And there goes the science that clicks into that about how I think about things and approach them.
yeah.
It's the same thing, I think, with you when you with bringing your experience of working with people as well. I think it's fascinating. I actually love it. I really do. I love it. And I love working with people and I love seeing them succeed,
Yeah.
which
Well,
I
and
think
I
you do.
think the science part of it, again, this is my experience, but I think so many of us that don't feel scientifically minded, like we don't feel like our brains think that way. I think it's an unfortunate circumstance of our upbringing, because when I took your class in person, we had a few days together and those things made so much sense the way you explained them, in terms of our color and how our eyes see. And that was not my experience of like high school biology when I learned about the eyeball. I remember little bits of something happening, and learning about cones and that kind of stuff, but it was not explained in the same way. So when you tie that science part into color and how it changes as we age and all that, that to me is so fascinating and much more accessible. So if anybody's watching and they think, oh, I don't have a science mind, maybe it's just how it was presented to you. Because I sort of feel now I'm really curious about that stuff and wish I could take more classes in relation to color and even dyeing with a slant to the creative, but understanding the science, yeah, I find it.
Yay!
Yeah. So yeah, it's very fascinating. Very fascinating. And I love the idea of a journey. Like the rug takes us on a journey. Um, I think that is probably something a lot of people can relate to. Okay, so the next question I want to ask is if there was something that you wished you'd been taught earlier in your rug hooking journey, or if maybe there's just something that you have since learned that you'd like to pass on to new rug hookers that you think is helpful for them at the beginning of their journey.
I think probably the most important thing that I would say to someone is when you start rug hooking and you are, you're either learning how to hold a hook or learning how to pull up loops, or you're onto the stage of doing some shading or whatever. if you run into a situation where someone is telling you how to do something and trying to demonstrate and lead you that way, and you feel that it is just not comfortable for you, or you'd rather, or you're afraid, but you don't want to admit that you're afraid,
Yeah.
just remember that the most important thing is that you actually enjoy the process of what you're doing. So if you do it just a little differently than someone else might be used to doing it, it's okay.
Mhm.
It's fine. Enjoy it. Move on. There'll be things that you'll hate. I'm trying to think of something that I hated. I think I just fell in love with rug cooking, so I'm not going to remember. But just enjoy the process. And if you're going to pull it a little bit differently, or do it differently, run with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very good advice. And I wonder if your experience was a little bit different than somebody's who, because starting with primitive, when I've asked this question to people that have been hooking for a long time, sometimes they refer to their first experience with the fine shading and the very, fine cuts of wool and more specific detailed patterns. So I wonder if that had influenced you when you came to that later, you had that experience of sort of figuring out your style or your comfort with those tools.
I think, it's funny because I actually had a hard time when I started selecting colors from the noodles that the teacher provided, because I tend to like brighter colors
Mm.
and not very subdued colors. And there were a lot of subdued colors in that bag that were just, it was hard for me. Whenever I would find the really bright ones, I always incorporated them into my
Right.
rug. And
Yeah.
so it was, and she was great. She was great because she said, it's your rug, run with it.
Yeah. That's nice. That's really nice. Yeah. Oh, I think that's great advice. I often tell people there's no rug hooking police either. So even if you do it sort of wrong or what somebody says is wrong, like what's the worst that's going to happen?
Right.
Is there something that you love, like a foundation fabric, a tool, a material, something that you're like, oh, without this, it would not be as enjoyable?
I have to say that I am completely and totally enthralled with my pencil hook. If
Oh,
I don't have my pencil hook when I'm doing most of my rug hooking, I can't hook. I just love the fact that I can, use it like this. I don't like to palm. I like using things as a pencil. So my
yeah,
pencil hook and my floor frame, which rotates. I've
yeah,
got one of the early Charlie frames, and those two things are the best.
yes, yes. I do not have those things, but I can understand your enjoyment of them. Absolutely. Yeah. Having the right hook is so, so important. And I think it was in your class where my friend who came with me was desperately searching for the right hook and went through multiple. So if anybody's watching this and feels like, what are they talking about? It's when you found a hook that you love, all of a sudden the other hooks are just not acceptable.
It's so true. Audition your hooks because you're going to carry them for the rest of your hooking career.
Yeah. Yeah. The right hook makes such a difference. Well, um, can you describe or articulate what the feeling is you get from rug hooking? Like, why do you keep coming back to it? Um, is there something that you can express? I know this is a hard question. And to me, it's an emotional answer, but um, how do you describe it to people who don't know what rug hooking is all about?
Um, for me personally, I I think the best way of describing it is after I had an accident where I had a traumatic brain injury, and it seemed like life ended with what I was used to doing. rug hooking actually brought me back to life. It put me in a position where I could grow, continue to learn, continue to express myself, continue to use the science that I had been living for so many years and incorporate that into it and actually share it with people that also either loved it already or were suddenly exposed to it and could see the beauty that it can offer them in their personal lives. It's a different journey that along the way, I'm always learning and I'm always growing. And that's what's most important to me, to be constantly learning. I'm just fascinated by learning.
Yeah. That is, you've said it so perfectly. There's nothing I can say. That is perfect. I'm going to share my screen and bring up a rug that you shared with me that we can talk about. It is, oh, here we go. Let's just bring it up. Oh, okay. That is not what I wanted to bring up. Let's try that again. Sorry. There we go. Can you see that? Oh, there we go. It took a second.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So tell us about this rug.
That is my Gargoyle of Notre Dame. Back in my early 20s, I traveled to Europe and stopped in Paris and visited the cathedral. And I was just enthralled of how huge it was. And there were all these gargoyles, and they were amazing. And this one caught my eye because to me, he looked like he had been there for hundreds and hundreds of years, looking out below in the square of where the cathedral is, never ever being able to partake in what was going on in the square, but only to watch and observe what was going on. And I like the fact that he had his tongue sticking out, because I imagined a little boy in the square, medieval clothing, looking up and sticking his tongue out at him, and he sticking his tongue out at the little boy. So over the years, he's actually acquired a life, a personality for me. And a few years back, I actually found a 1901 postcard on sale on eBay. And I'm like, that's it. That's the one that I want to hook. I want him in that position. I want that in the background. And so I bought the postcard. I won the bid for the postcard, and I drew the pattern for him. And I decided that I wanted him to be in just the break of morning, where there was still a fog in the background that was just starting to lift. I gave him a blue eye because our oldest daughter has blue eyes.
Perfect.
But he's just my favorite gargoyle from the cathedral.
Wow. And how big is this piece? Because it's hard to tell with on a screen.
He's 22 by 29.
Okay. Wow.
And he was that journey was just a great journey to go on to hook him.
Yeah.
And actually, when the cathedral burned down, I was still working on him. And I actually hooked in a couple of red little pieces of wool just to symbolize the cathedral fire. Yeah. He survived the fire.
Did he?
And I hope eventually he goes back. But I love him. I think he's great.
He is great. He is great. Now, the pieces that I've seen of yours mostly are lots of color. So this one is very different. And we mentioned earlier, you love bright colors. So how was it working on a piece with lots of different values, but not a lot of different colors, certainly not bright colors?
I really enjoyed doing it. Yeah. Because there's cool grays and there's warm grays that I used in it. And so I love expanding as many values that I can possibly work with. So this it was a delight to work on. I really, really loved working on this one. And maybe someday I'll do another one, because there's other ones that
Oh
now
yeah.
there's like a stork one that I think is really cool. So I'm like, I might turn into the Notre Dame gargoyle lady if I continue along this way. Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. We'll see.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of potential for, different gargoyles if you start down that road. And any tips? Because one thing I get asked, which I don't know why I get asked, because I do not traditionally do a lot in only wool strips, but people that do and do lots of values, do you have a tip or sort of method to keep your values organized when you're working?
So one thing that I do all the time is I always take photos of the wools that I'm working with, and I convert them to a grayscale using my phone.
Mhm.
And I order them that way into Ziploc bags. A lot of people have strip sorters, or they like to have standing racks that they can put their strips on. I find that for me, the easiest way of doing it is actually putting them in Ziploc baggies and pinning them together with a safety pin, because the travel with that is easy if I have to go to a class or a hook-in, as opposed to having to fold a lot of things up,
Mhm.
and try to carry everything over.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Did you ever count how many different values you have in this piece?
I did. I think of the warm grays. Let me see if I can remember. I think I've got 14 values of the warm grays, and I've got 16 values of the cool grays. But everybody sees value differently also.
I do remember that from your class. Yes.
So some people can really tell differences between very
Mhm.
fine shades of gray, and some of us don't see as many, and that's okay. That's what makes everybody's work unique too.
Yeah. Is that something, do you think people can learn to see more values like with practice, or is it something that is just as, um, you know, what you're born with or what you have available?
Well, you know what, I think you can learn to start to discern values a little bit more with time. um, there's also the aging process, or the eye health that
Mhm.
comes into play in terms of how you can look at things. If you look at, for example, someone who has had a cataract,
Mm.
there's that affects how you see things. But then having cataract surgery and having the cataract removed, suddenly there's so much more to see, and things are so much more vivid. And I think they actually start to see even more discerning values between each other than they had previously. So, it's a very amorphous, you move
Yeah.
back and forth with it. And it depends on the light that you're looking at it, right? I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
if you're looking at it in bright light sunlight, it's going to be different than in very, very, very minimal light.
Yeah. 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 So many variables, I guess.
That's
It,
what makes it exciting.
yeah, it does. That's what makes it absolutely. I get excited thinking about it. And this piece is just so stunning. Now I want to do sort of monochromatic because I've never done that. And I love this piece, but I love his blue eye, and the little bit of pink on his tongue is so perfect.
Monochromatics are fun to do. If you ever get a chance to do it, go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's definitely on my to-do list. It is beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm just going to bring us back. Um, Hopefully this is going okay. I keep getting notice my internet's unstable, but anyway. Well, thank you, Ania. Those are my questions today. I will post links to your blog, which is so fun. My mother's a hooker, if anybody hasn't checked that out. And yeah, it will be on underneath this on YouTube with your Instagram and your Facebook. And if anybody is looking for classes, I assume that's where you will post them, any upcoming classes you have. And I
Yes.
highly recommend taking a class with Ania. I thoroughly enjoyed it and learned a lot. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been delightful.
Yeah, it's always nice to talk rug hooking, isn't it?
It's wonderful.
Yeah. So thanks for watching, and I look forward to the next episode of Rugspirations. Thank you, Ania.
Thank you.